There is no law that requires your television to last 10 years. There is no regulation that defines durability in consumer electronics. And there is no manufacturer anywhere in the world legally obligated to build a television that survives beyond its warranty period. That is not a loophole. That is the system. Because buried inside modern consumer protection law is a quiet assumption that products are allowed to fail as long as they don't fail too soon. But what counts as too soon has never been clearly defined. And in that ambiguity, an entire industry has learned how to design products that fail precisely on time. Not by accident, not by defect, but by design. If you bought a television in the last 5 years, there is a measurable probability that it will begin to fail between year 2 and year 4. Not catastrophically, not all at once, but gradually. A dimming panel, a flickering backlight, a software slowdown, a system update that introduces problems instead of fixing them. At first, it feels like bad luck. Then it feels like wear and tear. But when millions of identical failures begin appearing within the same narrow window of time, it stops being coincidence. It becomes a pattern. This is not a story about one brand or one defective product line. This is a story about how modern televisions are engineered, manufactured, and sold, and why the system behind them quietly rewards failure. There was a time when televisions weren't disposable. In the 1980s and 1990s, cathode ray tube televisions routinely lasted 10, 15, even 20 years. Not because companies were more ethical, but because the economics were different. Manufacturers competed on durability because replacement cycles were slow, repairs were common, components were modular, and consumers expected longevity. A failed component could be replaced. A faulty board could be repaired. The product was not sealed. It was serviceable. And because of that, failure did not mean replacement. It meant maintenance. But then something changed. Not suddenly. Not visibly. But structurally. In the early 2000s, the television industry underwent 3 simultaneous transformations. Flat panel technology replaced CRT. Manufacturing moved aggressively offshore. And most importantly, profit margins began shrinking. Flat-screen TVs were expensive to develop. But once production scaled, prices collapsed. A television that once cost $2,000 could now be sold for $600, then $400, then $300. To the consumer, this looked like progress. Better technology at lower prices. But inside the industry, it created a problem. If you can't increase the price, you must reduce the lifespan. Not officially. Not in writing. But in practice. Most modern televisions come with a standard warranty of 1 year. Some extend to 2. Very few go beyond that. That is not arbitrary. It is a boundary. Because once a product exits warranty coverage, the manufacturer is no longer financially responsible for its failure. And that creates a target window. A zone where failure is no longer a liability, but still early enough to trigger replacement. That window sits, very consistently, between 24 and 48 months. Across brands, across models, across regions, failure patterns begin to cluster. LED backlights degrading, capacitors failing, power boards burning out, software instability increasing. Individually, these are explainable. Collectively, they form a statistical fingerprint. This does not mean engineers are instructed to make products fail. That would be illegal and easily exposed. Instead, the system works differently. It creates constraints, budget constraints, material constraints, time constraints, and within those constraints, durability becomes negotiable. No one writes, "Make this TV fail in 3 years." Instead, decisions are made like this. Use a capacitor rated for 3,000 hours instead of 10,000. Use thinner LED strips to reduce cost. Seal the panel to reduce assembly time, even if it traps heat. Limit software support to a fixed cycle. Each decision on its own is defensible. Together, they define a lifespan. It's like building a bridge designed to carry traffic for 5 years. Not because it can't last longer, but because reinforcing it would cost more than replacing it. And once you understand that, a more uncomfortable question appears. What part of your television is actually failing first? Because it's almost never the screen. When a modern television dies, it rarely stops working completely. Instead, one subsystem fails. And that subsystem is usually the backlight. Most LED TVs rely on arrays of small light-emitting diodes behind the panel. These LEDs generate heat. And heat is the enemy of longevity. To extend lifespan, you need proper heat dissipation, high-quality materials, conservative power levels, all of which cost money. So instead, manufacturers optimize for brightness and cost, not longevity. Brighter screens sell better in showrooms. They look more vibrant under retail lighting. But higher brightness means higher current, more heat, faster degradation. So the product performs better initially and fails sooner quietly. After 2 to 3 years, LEDs begin to dim unevenly, some fail entirely, dark spots appear, the image becomes inconsistent. The TV still works, technically, but the experience degrades. And repair? Often more expensive than replacement. Not because repair is impossible, but because the product was never meant to be repaired. Modern televisions are not built like older electronics. They are glued, laminated, compressed into ultra-thin assemblies. Opening them risks damaging the panel. Replacing internal components requires specialized tools. And spare parts are often unavailable. The consumer faces a decision: repair at high cost and uncertainty, or replace entirely. Most choose replacement. And the cycle continues. At this point, the pattern is clear. The failure is predictable. The repair is impractical. The replacement is inevitable. But this still doesn't explain the most important question. Why has the entire industry converged on the same outcome? Because the real mechanism isn't inside your television. It's inside the business model behind it. And once you see it, you won't look at any modern product the same way again. The modern television is not a high-margin product. It looks expensive. It feels advanced. It dominates your living room. But economically, it is closer to a commodity than a premium device. Margins are thin. Competition is global. And pricing pressure is relentless. A 55-inch television that retails for $500 may generate only a small profit for the manufacturer once you account for panel production, assembly, shipping, retail distribution, marketing. Which means the real money is not made when the TV is sold. It is made when the TV is replaced. If a television lasts 10 years, a manufacturer sells 1 unit per customer per decade. If it lasts 3 to 5 years, that number doubles or triples. That difference is not incremental. It is existential. And so the industry does not need products to fail immediately. It only needs them to fail predictably, late enough to avoid refunds, early enough to trigger repeat purchases. Durability is no longer the goal. Turnover is. Hardware tells only half the story. Because modern televisions are no longer just displays. They are computers. They run operating systems. They receive updates. They host apps. They track usage. And like all software-driven devices, they are subject to a different kind of decay. A television's software ecosystem evolves over time. Apps demand more memory. Operating systems become heavier. Security patches accumulate. New features are added. But the hardware does not change. The result is predictable. What was fast becomes slow. What was stable becomes inconsistent. What worked stops working. Updates are presented as improvements. But in many cases, they introduce performance degradation, compatibility issues, increased system load. Not deliberately, but inevitably. Because software is built for the future. Hardware is built for the present. And the gap between them grows over time. After a few years, streaming apps lag, menus freeze, features disappear, support ends. The television still turns on, but it no longer functions as expected. This is not sabotage. It is neglect. Support cycles are finite. Maintaining old hardware is expensive. And there is no financial incentive to optimize software for devices that have already been sold. the device becomes obsolete, while still physically intact. Failure patterns are not theoretical. They are documented, but not always publicly aggregated. Across repair forums, technician reports, and service logs, consistent trends emerge. Backlight failure within 2 to 4 years, power supply issues within similar timeframes, software degradation beginning as early as year 2. These are not isolated incidents. They are statistically significant clusters. Because failure is dispersed. One household at a time. One device at a time. There is no single moment when the system reveals itself. Only a slow accumulation of identical experiences. It just stopped working. It wasn't worth fixing. I bought a new one. And over time, this becomes normal. Expected. Accepted. The question stops being, why did it fail? And becomes, how long did it last? Repair used to be part of ownership. Now it is an obstacle. Modern televisions are engineered in ways that make repair technically difficult, economically irrational, logistically impractical. To repair a failed backlight, the panel must be opened, layers must be separated, components must be replaced with precision. The labor alone often exceeds the cost of a new television. Even when repair is possible, spare parts may be scarce, documentation may be limited, tools may be specialized. Repair exists, but access to repair does not. When repair becomes harder than replacement, failure becomes final. Is any of this illegal? Planned obsolescence as a concept is difficult to regulate because intent is nearly impossible to prove. Manufacturers do not need to admit, we designed this to fail. They only need to demonstrate, we met safety standards. We honored the warranty. We followed industry norms. And that is enough. Consumer protection laws focus on safety, misrepresentation, immediate defects. They do not define expected lifespan, long-term durability, repairability. A product can be legally compliant and still be functionally disposable. To understand why this system persists, you have to follow the pressure upstream. Television manufacturing is distributed across component suppliers, panel manufacturers, assembly plants, software developers, each operating under cost constraints. If one supplier reduces cost by 5%, the next must follow. Margins are squeezed at every stage, and durability is often the first variable to be compromised. Not because it is unimportant, but because it is invisible at the point of sale. Consumers cannot see capacitor quality, thermal design margins, long-term stress tolerance. They see brightness, size, price. So that is what companies optimize. From the outside, the television market appears competitive. Dozens of brands, hundreds of models, endless variation. But beneath that diversity lies convergence. Many televisions share similar panels, similar components, similar supply chains. Differences exist, but they are often incremental. Failure patterns begin to align. Not because companies are colluding, but because they are solving the same problem in the same way. There is one final component, and it does not exist in factories or boardrooms. It exists in the consumer. Expectation. If you expect a product to last 10 years, a 3-year failure feels unacceptable. If you expect it to last 3 to 5 years, that same failure feels normal. Over time, expectations have shifted. Quietly, gradually. Shorter lifespans are no longer shocking. They are anticipated. Once failure becomes expected, it no longer needs to be hidden. So what exactly is happening to your television? It is not being sabotaged. It is not being remotely disabled. It is not part of a hidden conspiracy. It is being optimized. Optimized for cost, performance, replacement cycles. And within that optimization, longevity becomes a secondary priority. Not eliminated, but reduced. Just enough to survive the warranty, satisfy the purchase, and fail in time for the next upgrade. There is no switch inside your television counting down to failure. No timer waiting to expire. What exists instead is something more subtle, more systemic. and far more difficult to see. A set of decisions, made independently, aligned economically, and repeated at scale. Each one reasonable, each one defensible, each one small, until, collectively, they produce the same outcome. A product that works, until it doesn't. And when it stops working, the system offers you a solution. Not repair, not recovery, but replacement. Another purchase, another cycle, another 3 years. And once you understand that, you stop asking, why did my TV fail? And start asking, why was it ever built to last longer? If you want to understand what the next thing you buy is really designed to do, subscribe.